Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. We are only hours away from a government shutdown, and the Democrats have a very clear binary choice. They can choose to keep the government open by voting for a short-term, nonpartisan, clean, continuing resolution, 24 pages long, or they can vote to shut the government down. That's what we're looking at. They, as you all know, have voted during the time they had the majority 13 different times, and when Biden was in the White House, on short-term continuing resolutions, 13 different times. And so it begs the question is what's changed? And I think what's changed is President Trump is in the White House. That's what this is about. This is politics. And there isn't any substantive reason why there ought to be a government shutdown. This is something that has been done routinely, as I said, 13 different times when the Democrats have the majority. But we are not going to be held hostage for over $1 trillion in new spending on a continuing resolution, nor are we going to be held hostage to allow illegals to get free health care in a continuing resolution. These are things that they're demanding as part of their so-called negotiation. Ladies and gentlemen, there isn't anything here to negotiate. This is a routine funding resolution to keep the government open so that we can continue our appropriations work and fund the government in the old-fashioned way, which is allowing the Appropriations Committee, Democrats and Republicans, to work together as they have been. And by the way, the Democrat leader keeps talking about not consulting. The Appropriations Committee, they picked the date. Democrats and Republicans, the big four on the Appropriations Committee, were consulting. They picked the date for the continuing resolution, November the 21st. And so this has been an open process from the very beginning. This year we opened up the appropriations process, something that wasn't done when the Democrats had the majority here in the Senate. But they have a clear choice in front of them today. And I hope there are Democrats out there. This may not represent the view of their leadership, but I'm hoping there are Democrats out there who are reasonable and understand what's at stake here. And as they have articulated many times in the past, the costs associated to the American people with a government shutdown. This is totally avoidable. It is a decision they're going to have to make, and if the government shuts down, it is on the Senate Democrats. The House has acted, the President's ready to sign the bill, and all that's left is for 8 Democrats to join us in passing that bill today. Senator Barrasso.
Well, the radical wing of the Democrat Party is demanding that Chuck Schumer shut down the government. If not, they'll be held to pay. We know that Chuck Schumer has had a war room going for the last couple of months to orchestrate the shutdown. That is their plan. So he comes up with this ransom note asking for $1 trillion to just keep the government open for 4 weeks. Republicans aren't going to buy that. President Trump's not going to sign it. There's a solution, and it's a simple, clean, continuing resolution to keep the government funded for the next 7 weeks as the appropriations committees work through the process. Democrats are pretty familiar with this. They've done it 13 times when Biden was in office, and the minimum number of votes they got was 65. But Chuck Schumer continues to bow down to that liberal wing, AOC, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren. The American people should not suffer the costs and the consequences of a Schumer shutdown because he is politically toxic in his own party.
All right, Mayor.
Good afternoon. Do you think if the president goes through and unilaterally starts to cut programs or lay people off, that will start to resonate with some of your Republican colleagues and say, hey, wait a minute, you know, he has that authority, but these are programs or things that are important to us. Is that a risk for Republicans?
Well, it's a risk that can be totally avoided. And if you're a Democrat who on countless occasions in the past has talked about the adverse consequences, the words of the Democrat leader, harmful, painful, chaotic consequences of a government shutdown, then just vote to keep the government open. I mean, those are things that they don't control, we don't control. How a shutdown gets managed is, at this point, a hypothetical question.
But your members aren't concerned that this might backfire, and sometimes these programs come back and they say, wait a minute, that was important to my state, that was important to my district.
Our members are unified that a government shutdown is a really bad idea for all those reasons, and it's the exact reason why Democrats ought to vote to keep the government open.
Democrats have been pretty clear. they're going to defeat this House CR when it comes to the floor today. What is Plan B? Will you keep on bringing this back to the floor? And do you think the House should reconvene before Tuesday to maybe move the ball?
I don't know what the House can do that they haven't already done. They passed the bill. It's a bill that's passed by the House, sitting here in the Senate, ready to be signed into law by the President. And so, no, it's up to the Senate Democrats. That's where we are. And if they decide to vote it down tonight, they're going to be the ones that have to explain at midnight tonight why the government is shut down. It's just, it's really pretty straightforward. And this is something, again, that's been routine around here for a long time until all of a sudden the far left, as Senator Barrasso pointed out, hijacked the Democrat leadership here in the Senate, and they've decided to hijack the American people and hold them hostage to try and get a laundry list, a wish list, a Christmas list of their left-wing priorities attached, in their case, to a 4-week continuing resolution. Ours is 7 weeks, but they'll have the same leverage 7 weeks from now that they have today. And as I've said before, we're happy to sit down with them and talk about the concerns they have, the issues they have with, for example, the premium tax credits. But you got to do that. You can't do that in the context of a hostage situation. They need to release the hostage.
If there is a shutdown.
About the impact on some of your constituents, particularly your farm constituents. This seems to be becoming a particularly bad to major crisis. No market in China, high input costs, low prices, and they are in a bind and going to need some additional help. Now, on top of that, they're facing a shutdown.
Right. And that's why we need to keep the government open. I'm just saying, the farm service agencies in my state, the Federal Highway Administration employees in my state or any of the other states and my colleagues who are represented here, the Park Service employees in our state, these are all people that are going to be affected by this. And not to mention our military men and women, or men and women in uniform. So this is a totally avoidable crisis. And again, we are not going to be held hostage by the Democrats for more than $1 trillion in new spending and all kinds of other items on their liberal wish list to include free health care for illegal immigrants in this country. That is all part of what can be avoided if they simply vote yes tonight.
Are you ruling out negotiations with Democrats if there's a shutdown? Are you ruling out any negotiations with Democrats if there is a shutdown?
The negotiation happens when the government's open. So let's keep the government open, and then we will have the negotiation. I've said it. I've said it yesterday at the meeting in the White House. I've said it to my Democrat colleagues. We're happy to sit down and talk about these other issues that they're interested in, but it should not have anything to do with whether or not, for a 7-week period, we keep the federal government open so that this government can continue to do its work and that we can continue to do our work through the regular appropriations process to fund the government. This is not complicated. It's something that's happened routinely around here for a long time, including the 13 times it happened when the Democrats had the majority. So it's a binary choice. They get a chance to make that vote today, and I'm hoping, I sincerely do hope, in the interest and the best interest of the American people, that the Democrats here in Washington decide to keep our federal government open. Thank you.
Your impression?
Madam President.
Senator from Michigan.
Madam President, in just a few hours, the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act is set to expire. If we don't extend these critical authorities, we will lose one of our most effective defenses against cyber attacks. As our adversaries' attacks continue to grow more aggressive and more sophisticated. This law has protected our economy, it has protected our infrastructure, and it has protected our government for more than a decade. It allows private companies and federal agencies to share real-time threat information before attacks spread, before systems are compromised, and before damage becomes irreversible. If this law expires, it'll be harder to protect businesses and critical infrastructure against cyber attacks. And cyber criminals and our adversaries will be emboldened to continue to try to breach our defenses. The original law was passed with a strong bipartisan support, And there is bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate to renew these protections for another 10 years. Even the Trump administration fully agrees. And the White House and the Department of Homeland Security support this 10-year extension. A broad coalition of industry leaders are asking for Congress to act quickly to pass a long-term extension, which provides businesses with the certainty they need to know these protections will be available to them for years to come. That's why Senator Rounds and I introduced a clean, bipartisan, 10-year extension in April with strong support from stakeholders who are absolutely counting on these protections. It's time to pass this bill today. Otherwise, we'll lose our networks, our businesses, and our economy. We're going to leave them exposed, vulnerable, and defenseless. We need to pass this legislation. I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs be discharged from further consideration of S. 1377, and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration, that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
Madam President,
Senator from Kentucky.
reserving the right to object. There's nothing better in politics than fake outrage. I'm so outraged, my program's going to go away. Oh, but you could vote this afternoon at 5 o'clock to extend your program. So instead of all the hot air, why don't you come to the floor and tell us you are actually going to vote to keep the government open and your program will be extended? You've got a chance. So let's see how you vote this afternoon. I object.
Objection is heard.
Madam President.
Senator from Michigan.
I want to be clear. This is a voluntary program that businesses across the country have been able to count on for 10 years. And these same companies are urging us to extend the exact same protections for another 10 years. These cybersecurity protections keep our country safe. They have stopped cyber attacks that could have exposed America's private data or compromised businesses and our economy, or even taken over critical infrastructure like the electric grid or in our transportation system. Countless businesses in every industry across the country depend on these protections. Telling them they could be eliminated again in just 2 months with a short-term CR does not give them the certainty they need to work. This is why they want the 10-year extension. The federal government needs to help them prevent catastrophic attacks. We have broad bipartisan consensus, not for just a couple months, that doesn't help anybody, but broad bipartisan consensus, including support, again, from the Trump administration, who fully supports this, to extend these authorities for the next 10 years. That will ensure that every industry in America can continue to count on these protections to be available. If my colleague doesn't support clean authorization, well, he's chair of the committee, he should have initiated a bipartisan process. He should have perhaps convened hearings, like a chairman normally would if they actually care about an issue. The committee should have had a chance to hear from key industry stakeholders. The committee could have heard directly from officials from President Trump's White House and the President Trump's Department of Homeland Security. They would tell them, as they've told everyone, that they need to pass a 10-year extension. Not a couple months, 10-year extension. But that hasn't happened in our committee. But if my colleague is not interested in meaningful compromise or working across the aisle on legislation in his committee's jurisdiction that is absolutely essential, then I would ask that he at least stop standing in the way of the rest of the entire United States Senate and broad bipartisan support in the House and pass a clean 10-year extension of this proven law. I cannot predict the ways in which cyber criminals and adversaries will try to take advantage of a situation if we can't extend these authorities. At this moment, let's be very clear, there is only one person standing in the way. And I'm certainly willing to work with my colleague on his concerns about free speech, but he would not even let our committee have any kind of discussion about any legislation, including his own. It's time to let the Senate work its will and vote to extend these cybersecurity protections. It is absolutely essential for this nation's national security.
The Senator from North Carolina.
Madam President, 1 year ago, Hurricane Helene brought devastating winds and record-breaking rainfall to western North Carolina. Families were displaced, homes were destroyed, and tragically, lives were lost. Even in the face of devastation, North Carolinians showed unity and compassion. Today, I rise to recognize Mr. Eddie Hunnell of Holly Springs, North Carolina, who exemplified that spirit. On Friday, September 27th, 2024, floodwaters surged through North Fork, New River in Grassy Creek, North Carolina. Mr. Hunnell had made a 3.5-hour trip to western North Carolina to celebrate his son's wedding, but what should have been a joyous occasion quickly turned into a crisis. As rising water carried trees, furniture, and other debris downstream, Mr. Hunnell spotted a 66-year-old Grassy Creek resident in distress, Miss Leslie Worth. She was wearing a life jacket. She was standing in the second-story bedroom window of her home that had been knocked from its foundation. Miss Worth bravely jumped out of the window to save her own life. She plunged into the dangerous conditions and was swept up by the current, and without a moment's hesitation, Mr. Hunnell made the brave decision to attempt to rescue her. He steered a canoe through the flood and then, undeterred by the raging current, leapt into the water and swam to reach her. Through determination and resolve, he swam to her to safer ground, undoubtedly saving her life. This was nothing short of an act of extraordinary bravery and selflessness. Once Miss Worth was reunited with her husband, Mr. Hunnell, he welcomed the couple to join his family that evening at his son's rehearsal dinner. He knew they were without a home, without a meal, and without any warmth. He even went further by setting up a fund to help them rebuild their lives, and he was the very first to contribute. In June, Mr. Hunnell was recognized for this extraordinary act of heroism as a recipient of the Carnegie Medal. This award honors civilians who risk death or serious physical injury to an extraordinary degree, saving or attempting to save the lives of others. And I could think of no one more deserving than him. Madam President, the motto of the great state of North Carolina is Esse quam videre, which means to be rather than to seem. I firmly believe Mr. Hunnell has lived out our state's motto to the fullest. His actions remind us that in times of crisis, ordinary individuals can perform extraordinary deeds. I'm grateful for his swift, life-saving intervention during Hurricane Helene to save an innocent life, and I ask my colleagues to join me in honoring him for his exemplary service. May his courage continue to be an inspiration for us all. I yield the floor.